Yep, I hype me up, I guess, yep, I hype me up, I guess, yep. Take a space, sis. Got my room with this. Take a space, sis. I got my room with this. I'm a trip for this. They cannot resist. The space is on abyss. Take a space, sis. I hype me up, I gas me up. I hype me up, I gas me up. I hype me up, I gas me up. Take a space, sis. Got my room with this. I'm a trip for this. This space is on abyss. Push through, sis. It's a ghetto, not designed for my being. I know when to chill. I'm humble. Yeah, I don't shy away from compliments. I receive. I'm worth the fuss. I know this inner work will take me from petty to queen to goddess to priestess. Competing and comparison is a no for me, dog. My growth is not duplicatable or copy friendly. I am powerful beyond measure. The version of me others created in their mind is not my responsibility. I normalize saying no when others want too much for me. I uproot any soul ties of attachment that has held me hostage to lower paradigms of thought, feeling, expressing, and womaning. Take a space, sis. Got my wrong with this. I'm a fool for this. Rest is a revolution and a luxury. I'm learning to step out of survival mode. I wake up to my own BS. Awareness put me on. There ain't nobody to put me on. I am the blueprint. I allow others to tell on themselves. Their true nature will be revealed. That's what I gotta know. I love myself and others out loud. I am proud of what and who I love. I do the most for mine. I use my voice, my heart, my thoughts, my truth to speak up about what I want. I don't use coded language. I'm loud with it. It's noticeable that I'm no longer stuck in chapters with women who don't match my vibe. That's on period. My love language are explored by genuine connections. I'm worthy even when I'm bored, even when I rest, even when I am confused, even when I'm still healing. I feel so right and enough, and that feeling won't stop. Sis, my intuition said what she said. I trust her now. I show up fully being the most. I won't over-explain myself. I am who I am. I bring what I bring. I said what I said. This energy though, I'm so awake to this big energy essence. Nothing will stand in the way of me asking for what I want. This is how my needs are being met. I won't explain why I'm so dressed up. I'm the most always. No matter how it makes others feel or think of me, I'm gonna take up space. Honey, I ain't shrinking a kid. Take a space, sis. I got my room with this. In the book, in the bedroom, in the Zoom, on the IG, in my truth, on the beach. I'ma reach. I hype me up, I gas me up. I hype me up, I gas me up. Take a space, sis. Got my room with this. I'm a trip for this. They cannot resist. The space is on abyss. I'm a trip for this. They cannot resist. Take a space, sis. That is Tony Jones. And the name of that joint is Take Up Space, Sis. So I have an announcement, and I apologize for being so late getting to you. I'm sure everyone has already heard, but I want to shout out to Brother Ramzu Yunus for endurance, for the ordeal he has endured in Detroit, Michigan, at the hands of the Detroit police. They kept him in interrogation or without charges for over 2 days in the Detroit jail. And they didn't even charge him with anything. They didn't even charge him with anything. I haven't had a chance to speak to Brother Ramzu yet. I plan to, but they better not have harmed a hair on his head. I said that. They better not have harmed a hair on his head. I said that. Now, I don't even need to speak it again. I am happy that the brother is free. I understand why this happened. The people need to see
that you're operating on a very low vibrational level. If you don't vibrate higher, you're not going to survive. If you don't vibrate higher, you're not going to make it. And if you don't make it, your children aren't going to make it. You won't be able to help anyone else. You have an elder who's depending on you. That person won't make it. You won't make it. It is this negative energy that is causing us to perish. It's what's causing us to fight. And right now, it is the culmination of a long, long period of incorrect thinking and behaving. If you are driven by fear of any kind, let me repeat. If you are driven by fear of any kind, you will not make it. Fear is only an indicator, just like a turn signal. It's letting you know you have something coming up. The car in front of you turns the turn signal on, you know that car is about to turn in one direction or the other. That's all fear is. All you got to do is prepare for whatever is coming. I have a very special video tonight. Many of our people really don't have a clue as to what's going on. The Great Awakening, which happened in a greater what's the word I'm trying to use? So in August of 2019, the awakening broadened, okay? The signal got stronger and more people began to wake up. The signal was always getting stronger and stronger, but now the porthole, the veil is very, very, very thin. So they can see and hear everything that's going on over here from the other side of that veil. The problem is that your vision, your intuition, your stuff is blocked. You can't understand what's going on the other side of that realm. And that's because you choose not to. You've been trained not to, okay? And so you're operating in fear. You went to church. If you're a Christian, you went to church. They told you when you died, you go to heaven as long as you were doing the right thing. Well, if you're afraid, then you ain't doing the right thing. Simple as that. So don't get mad at us. Don't get mad at us because you chose to operate in unison with predators. This is the story I want to show you guys. I'm done. My soapbox jumped off there, Joker. This is the story that I want to show you guys. I told you I've been doing a lot of research, but I've also been busy doing me, taking care of me, as you can see, by Sister Tony Jones, Goddess, forgive me, Tony Jones, who suggests such a thing. That's why I resonate with that. Let me just show you a little something. This is a video that I ran across, and I just thought maybe I would share this news with you. For those of you who don't know it, and I'm gonna comment on it a little bit, so stay with me, okay?
I'm for president, I'm for president, I'm for president, I'm for president. You like ice, I like ice, everybody likes ice.
When retired World War II General Dwight David Eisenhower ran for president, he was hailed as a military savior, an all-American hero from the plains of Kansas.
Everybody likes ice for president, hang out the banner, beat the drum, take ice to Washington.
Now is the time for all good Americans to come to the aid of their country. Vote for Eisenhower.
No one expected that in his farewell address he would...
Mind you, he too is a part of the bloodline. They're all related, remember? Go look it up. There are receipts available.
Would identify and oppose the emergence of a new power constellation, the military-industrial complex.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
Many of us old heads already know what Eisenhower said. And they get up going to work every day and acting as if, and they scared. They scared.
His was a prophetic speech, especially for a military leader who saw that a fusion of government and corporate power could lead to what he called unwarranted influence and misplaced power. "50 years later, on the warning's anniversary, President Eisenhower's own granddaughter, Susan, documented how the military-industrial complex had grown. She wrote, "In less than 10 years, our military and security expenditures have increased by 119%. This new book on the clout of the military-industrial complex by William Hartung details the power it wields. He told me how it works.
Military contractors, uniform military, the Pentagon, basically pushing their interest at the expense of taxpayer, national security, in some cases, their civil liberties.
Is it a description of an actual reality?
Well, the military-industrial complex is probably more real now than it was when Eisenhower coined the phrase. A company like Lockheed Martin, not only are they building missiles, they're building cluster bombs, they're building, submarines. At the same time, they're helping process your taxes. They're counting the census. They're running fingerprint databases for the FBI. So it's kind of morphed from just the military-industrial complex to sort of the national security state. So you've got surveillance as well as weapons building.
Hartung says these companies, in effect, dictate our foreign policy.
They've sort of captured our foreign policy and captured our military policy, really for special interest purposes to a large degree.
Writer David Swanson believes that this military-industrial complex relies on wars or the threat of wars to stay in business.
President Eisenhower pushed war propaganda in the very same speech and throughout his career, but he could not have been more right. I think he probably did not imagine how huge the problem of what he called the military-industrial complex would become. I describe it as a banker bailout every year. It is $1 trillion, over $1 trillion every year into the machinery of mass murder. It is over half of federal discretionary spending from the US government. It is as much and more than all other nations of the world put into the military each year. It is much of it unaccountable. The Pentagon routinely loses quantities of money that are as much as most other governmental departments get.
It's not just that more money is being spent on arms, but the rise of the military-industrial complex has been accompanied by an overall rise in corporate power, and not just in the military sphere. Military contractors now have disproportionate influence, says Sheila Krumholz of the Center for Responsive Politics.
There is a huge sum of money coming from defense contractors in particular, and these range from AT&T and Boeing, the largest multinational kind of Goliaths. Their primary source of revenue may be telecommunications or transport.
AT&T is huge, yeah, and you have no idea how far their tentacles reach.
But they have huge contracts worth a ton of money with the DoD and military. There have been,
by the way, the DoD is the Department of Defense.
A number of pieces of legislation aimed at both making that connection more transparent and trying to put a lid on the kind of pay-to-play method that has ruled, for instance, earmarks.
Have we seen a pattern of military and industrial collusion and industrial, companies that do business with the Pentagon giving more and more money to politicians.
Many defense contractors were making contributions, spending lots of money to lobby, and in exchange winning contracts that maybe they weren't the best organizations to benefit from. So there has been a lot of research done about how money greases the skids for defense contractors. I'll also say that the revolving door plays an important role. So it's not just money, it's other forms of elite influence where people in the Department of Defense are kind of lining up their jump to the private industry where they can rake in huge sums of money and lucrative posts in private industry that they used to regulate.
Alongside the military are huge intelligence agencies with vast budgets to spy,
You see the
run
DEA
covert
there?
action operations, collect personal data, and conceal how powerful interests operate. Today, the former head of CIA runs the Pentagon and was replaced by a general. The head of the Navy SEALs runs the Central Command. Secrecy is pervasive in a national security state, even as groups like WikiLeaks try to disseminate hidden information.
WikiLeaks, your baby, has in the last few years has released more classified documents than the rest of the world's media combined. Can that possibly be true?
Yeah, can it possibly be true? It's a worry, isn't it? That the rest of the world's media is doing such a bad job that a little group of activists is able to release more of that type of information than the rest of the world press combined.
Years earlier, an auto executive turned defense secretary Charles Wilson said what's good for General Motors is good for America. He saw no distinction between an elected government and an unelected corporation. GM was a car company that became a major defense supplier, buoyed by military spending, and then years later became a mortgage lender driven by Wall Street originated and often fraudulent subprime loans until it nearly collapsed and had.
What he just said, and you should go look this video up yourself because this is a discussion on another video. What he just said is basically that you don't have to be elected in to have elected power. And that's the way he thinks it should be. So therefore, corporations can now be people, and we the people, or the people, includes the corporations, even though they are, I guess, part of the elected process. They weren't elected in, so they have electoral power, and they are also people now. A corporation's a person. Right. I'm about to go get me one, LLC.
To be bailed out by government. The United States Supreme Court, in its Citizens United decision, has decided that corporations like GM have the rights of ordinary people and can openly and sometimes secretly lobby Congress and the public or finance political campaigns to promote their agendas. There are now many criticisms against Citizens United. Many of the arguments can be seen in this video by the Story of Stuff campaign.
We have a democracy in crisis. 85% of Americans feel that corporations have too much power in our democracy and people have too little. 85%. Hey, that's a majority. So let's get together and take our democracy back from the corporations. It's the first and most important step in making real progress on all the issues that people care most about.
There is also a counter campaign underway against corporate control of politics, focusing on two billionaire political donors, Charles and Edward Koch, two brothers, both industrialists and both funders of conservative campaigns, including one to suppress voting by Democrats. Filmmaker Robert Greenwald has distributed this video nationwide.
Folks like the Koch brothers are attempting to ensure that as few people of color and as few young people show up as possible.
We've undergone a coup d'etat. We live in a corporate state.
Chris Hedges is a best-selling author and former reporter for the New York Times.
The people who rule America are the large corporate entities, which are supranational. They have no loyalty to the nation state. They are
harvesting the country just like they're harvesting the rest of the globe. They're implanting a global neo-feudalism where workers around the planet have to be competitive, which means being competitive with sweatshop workers in Bangladesh who make 22 cents an hour, or prison labor in China. It's a global neo-feudalism.
Like right here in America.
It's one
They don't talk about that.
Is unassailable, completely untouchable, and more powerful than the host governments that where they're nominally based.
Hedges is not alone in this view. Professor Michael Clare specializes in studying the country's largest industry, oil and gas.
I would say that the oil industry, or energy writ large, coal, natural gas, uranium, is the most powerful lobby in America, the most powerful economic interest. And it's tied to other powerful interests: automobile, highway construction, suburbia, many other industries, tourism, are all linked to energy, and they work together to keep America addicted to oil and to avoid the transition to alternative fuels.
Do they have an influence on our politics? Do they have an influence on what happens in Washington, what happens in the ballot boxes of America?
They're the biggest contributors to electoral campaigns in general, especially to the Republican Party. And I think they have a very powerful influence.
Do you think most Americans know how powerful they are?
Only the people who see this power.
Look, I'm gonna give you one little hint. Get into hemp. Black America, I'm talking to you right now. Get into hemp, okay? When the Amazon kicked the logging industry out of the Amazon, they took a hit. They had to stop cutting down trees in the US. So they took a hit. And they were destroying the Amazonian forests. They were destroying, oh my gosh, making animals in the Amazon extinct, and logging industry. So when they took them to court, international court, and made them get out the Amazon, they made the corporations, these powerful mother freakers right here, they made them get out the Amazon, right? And they left, but they were mad. They had to go, but they burned the forest. They set it on fire on purpose before they left. Vindictive.
In their daily lives have grasped the strength of it.
For many Americans, the military-industrial complex is seen only as a source of jobs. And in fact, military contractors win political support and federal funds by promising to create jobs.
There are real jobs, people working in the weapons factories and all the subsidiary subcontractors, but it's a fraud because you could take those same dollars and put it into any other industry, into infrastructure, green energy, education, or even into tax cuts for working people and produce more jobs than you do with the military spending. So it's worse than nothing, purely on the economic terms.
For years, there have been protests against America's wars and the military, but most have targeted politicians, not necessarily the corporations who profit from making weapons and other products for the military. One of the groups that's most visible in challenging militarism is a women's group, Code Pink. Medea Benjamin is a co-founder.
I've learned that we don't rule America. I've learned that the Democrats don't rule America. The corporations rule America. I've been doing the work on the wars, and I've just been floored at how powerful these weapons manufacturers are, and how powerful the contractors are, and that they have the ability to kind of keep wars going. I mean, that's pretty amazing when you think about it. Like, I'm just doing a lot of work around the drones issue. Do you know there's a drones caucus in Congress? I mean, instead of having a caucus to feed preschool children, they decided it was more important to have a drone caucus, and that's because all the manufacturers in their districts are funding them.
They're quite open about it. And in fact, over 50 members of Congress have created a caucus for drones, where they openly promote the use and sale of drones at home and abroad. And then they've now authorized the flight of at least up to 30,000 drones in U.S. skies for whatever purpose. This is in contrast to the lack of any caucus for senior citizens, for children, for health coverage, for green energy, for human beings. There's a caucus for robots.
Did I mention that people in Cuba and in Costa Rica and in other places in Africa, a few are living, I would say the Dogon and a few other places, they live to 120 years old, not just one or two, a lot are living ripe old ages. Because those people care more about the people. Those governments care more about the people than they do power and control. If you are a US American, what do you care more about? People or power and control? I asked the question, and I'd like to let you know, we see you.
Eisenhower was so right, and he was so right when he said that it steals money, it robs us of food for our children, of healthcare for our parents. He was so right, and it's just worse and worse. And you get the little puppets in Congress, and I live in Washington now, so I see these little puppets and wish that they were like the NASCAR drivers that had to have their corporations on their suits, but they don't rule America. The corporations obviously rule America, and when it comes to war and peace, those corporations are so powerful that they've kept us for the last decade in war, and if we don't do something about it, they'll keep us in war for the next decade.
Beyond the debates about the role of the military, there may be a deeper
Comes to war and peace, those corporations are so powerful that they've kept us for the last decade in war, and if we don't do something about it, they'll keep us in war for the next decade.
Beyond the debates about the role of the military, there may be a deeper challenge because the United States has evolved from a nation into an empire with a far-flung system of bases, economic interests, and intertangled business dealings all around the world. Top political leaders interact with corporate leaders at meetings of elites like the Bilderberg Conference, the Trilateral Commission, and the International Monetary Fund meetings. It's all part of a global structure of corporate culture, politics, and power. Some, like the billionaire George Soros, told me a while back that the World Economic Forum is more like a networking party than a decision-making venue. Decisions are often made behind the scenes, not at public events.
Soros, see, he messed up. He talked too much. He in it, but he messed up. He spilled the beans. They're not that smart, y'all. They really aren't that smart.
The Davos meeting is an enormous sort of cocktail party. A lot of contacts, people meet and so on. A lot of things are discussed. It's actually very convenient because you can meet a lot of people whom you want to meet in a confined period of time. And it's also a media event.
Is it also a symbol of the growth of sort of economic power, of over political power, lack of sovereignty, the loss of sovereignty by some countries?
Well, it is actually symptomatic of the age because you have presidents and prime ministers courting the financiers and the industrialists.
Only a few Americans seem to understand how corporatization and globalization go hand in hand. Walter Teague was one of the first activists against the Vietnam War. He believes that Americans can't see the facts because they're trapped in myths. I asked him how he would explain this situation to people on Mars.
I'd have to explain some very crazy things to them. I'd have to explain it in terms that they would perhaps understand. I'd have to not use some of the terms that Americans commonly use. Because if you use the language that we're taught in school,
about democracy, free will, all of how the United States is number one, uber alles, right? All those terms lead the person to not being capable of understanding what you're saying, which is that there are really, and have been for a long time, a very small percentage, 1%, something like that, who really make most of the decisions. But they are smart enough to make them in a way that keeps most Americans, until recently, from realizing that they're being ruled.
We cannot undo the plutocracy, the kleptocracy,
They ain't that smart. I hear what he said. They ain't smart. Ain't that smart. But what they've done is they've inundated the people with distractions.
lack of representation without dismantling the military-industrial complex. This is the 1% of the 1%. This is where we give a banker bailout every year and we don't get a dime of it back. We borrow it from China, we pay it back with interest, we keep interest rates ridiculously low, we crash Wall Street, we bail it out because we've created a war economy without any need for war.
Well, I think if people had a better sense of how these companies, how the uniformed military, how their allies in Congress are basically running the show, scaring us into spending on weapons we don't need, I think they'd have the beginnings of a tool to do something about it. But I think absent that information, there's sort of nowhere to start. There's nowhere to sort of plant your feet and try to fight back against it.
So I'd have to tell the Martians it's going to be very hard for you to understand why Americans don't see how they're being screwed. They don't see it, except when it gets so bad or so contradictory or so blatant or so personal. And then they wake up one day and say, oh my God.
Does this mean in a way that business, that Wall Street, that defense contractors and others have disproportionate power? In other words, are they kind of one of the forces ruling our country that most people don't even know about?
I think that the money has great influence across the board, particularly where the issues are arcane and they seem disassociated with the average Americans, where constituents aren't paying attention and they're not being heard by their representatives in Washington. I think where people are paying attention, where it becomes there is a hue and cry from regular people, it's hard for the money to beat out the merits on policy. Politicians usually will not risk the political liability of being seen as catering to their the interest bankrolling their campaign if the voters are paying attention. They're usually not that unwise.
She right.
Most of the public doesn't interface with the military-industrial complex because they participate in the economy as consumers.
Y'all addicted.
But even there, they're being affected by a power shift and economic inequality that drives them deeper and deeper into debt. George Scribner is an executive with a corporation that advises other corporations. Today, it takes $200,000 a year to feel somewhat affluent. I asked George Scribner how he thinks growing inequality is affecting our politics. Who's in charge of our country? We keep reading more and more about big money in politics.
There was a great article of the 1%, by the 1%, for the 1%. And I think it might have been Vanity Fair, but I'm not positive right now. But they made a point that in politics, that I've been making in terms of business, is that for, since World War II, it was head count that made a difference. One person, one vote. So you play to the vote, one person, $1. You play to as many people as you could to get the dollars. Now, because the assets are concentrated at the high end in the hands of the few, actually money is much more valuable both to politicians and to marketers than the mass of people that comprise the middle class.
So is the mass of people being left out now? The mass of Americans?
They aren't being left out.
Yes, they are.
Certainly less important. So
yes, they are. You see how he did that? He couldn't say that out loud. Get in trouble. So basically, he said something at the beginning of this that was of the 1%, for the 1%, by the 1%. And I invite you to visit your city, your state constitution in whatever state you live in, I invite you to go look up, do something for yourself. Go look up the state constitution in the state that you live in and look up the US preamble, the United States, the preamble of the Constitution, that is. It is of the people, for the people, by the people. And so you wonder why the few rule the many. Well, it's not just the military industrial complex. It's also the prison industrial complex, the pharmaceutical industrial complex, any complex that has enough money to bribe the United States and their military. It's the military that's for sale. And when you join the military, you are owned by the military. You are a slave.
Believe their future is bright. But given the trends we've explored about who's in power, there certainly are doubts, especially because of the danger and threat of new wars that are being planned secretly, according to Professor Stanley Arano.
You go back here.
Future is bright. But given the
there are enough opportunities.
I tried to skip this dude.
That makes me think that the future won't be as bleak as it seems sometimes.
Gee, it's already there.
Let's hope so. Certainly most Americans believe their future is bright. But given the trends we've explored about who's in power, there certainly are doubts, especially because of the danger and threat of new wars that are being planned secretly, according to Professor Stanley Aronowitz.
There'll be a war against Iran.
Listen carefully.
As a matter of fact, unless you refuse to
Did you hear what he said?
Count, embargoes,
let's go back.
Things like that are going on.
Listen carefully.
There certainly are doubts, especially because of the danger and threat of new wars that are being planned secretly, according to Professor Stanley Aronowitz.
There'll be a war against Iran. As a matter of fact, unless you refuse to count embargoes, things like that are going on at this very moment, that is to say in March of 2012, that is virtually an act of war. That we are saying to the Iranians, either you bow to our demand that you do not develop nuclear weapons and you renounce nuclear weapons, or otherwise we will continue to bar your goods from going back and forth. I mean, after all, the market is part of the system. So they say you have no market rights.
So they're telling Iran that you can't do no nuclear weapons in your country, or we won't they'll put a trade embargo on you. Well, you know, there's a trade embargo on Cuba, and they're not even trying to develop nuclear weapons. The only reason there's a trade embargo on Cuba is because Cuba refused tourism. They didn't want tourism. They did not want the United States coming over there with prostitution, drugs, and all the mess the same way, creating pedophilia, creating debauchery, the way they're doing in every other country that tourism is accepted. And if you think I'm lying, look at the statistics. Again, I just told you that Cuba, the people there are living to 120 years old. I failed to mention that Cuba has the cure for lung cancer. Don't believe me? Look it up.
A war underway right now.
I think so.
But most Americans don't really know it, do they?
That's right.
Do they really know about this power elite? Do they really know about what C. Wright Mills talked about so many years ago? Why is that? And how can that change?
Because we don't have a left that really continually, in an effective way, talks about who has power in America. We have the Occupy movement talked about 99% being deprived of economic power and about inequality, but it is not even close to being an analysis that can be disseminated throughout the entire society. We don't have a daily news system of daily newspapers. We don't have a weekly newspaper. We have Twitter. We have various other kinds of social media that.
Do I need to remind you that Bill Cosby attempted to purchase NBC?
we have access to, but it does not replace the kind of systematic analysis that could take place as a result of having our own media.
So Americans, in a way, are still in the dark, and I think, you know, the Left Forum and so many other efforts are attempts to challenge that, to change that.
Well, yes, that's right.
Even as President Eisenhower exposed the military-industrial complex, he also expressed a very American, deeply felt desire for peace and justice that history has largely forgotten.
From the earth. And that in the goodness of time, all peoples will come to live together in a peace guaranteed by the binding force of mutual respect and love.
Who Rules America? That is the name of this documentary. And there's a couple of them. I really wanted to do the other one. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the commentary in a new video. So you'll have to catch me next time. I'll be uploading it very soon as well. But this one I'm going to upload right away. I want you to comment. Tell me what you think. And I also want you to share this with your family. Oh, one more thing. White people. White people out there. I really don't care about your belief systems. I don't care whether you like Black people or hate Black people. It doesn't matter to me. We're used to it, okay? So why do you need to continue to call attention to things that are not fair to you? Why do you need to belong to everything that Black people do? We are no longer attempting to belong to your circles. I personally don't want to be anywhere I'm not wanted. So, and I'm, you know, I was telling somebody else, I don't want to go to a restaurant that I've discovered. I won't go to certain restaurants that I've discovered are racist. I won't go because I prefer not to have everybody cook my food. You know, I don't understand why people of other backgrounds want so badly to be treated well by people you know for a fact don't like you. Why do you visit? Why do you want to pay your money to these people? Why do you want to visit their establishments and pay your hard-earned money to people that you know don't like you? They're going to spit in your food. They might even put bugs in your clothes when you go buy them. I don't want to get nobody no ideas because these predators are awful, and they're only doing it because they need to feel, in their minds, they need to feel empowered. So white people, those of you who watched my video, because I know you're out there, I strongly suggest that you unite as well. You're real good at forming militias, but you could use some work in your think tanks, because if they can't, once they can't get us, you'll be enslaved again, because Europeans enslaved Europeans. Nobody talks about that. You know, they talk about how the Moors enslaved Europeans and the Irish, but they don't talk about how other Europeans, white Europeans, enslaved white Europeans. The British enslaved the Irish. The British enslaved a lot of folk. The Crusaders went all over the place and did a bunch of stuff, not just in Africa. So, and they tried to go to China. China, okay, I digress. In Japan, they committed hara-kiri. They'll commit hara-kiri before they let you conquer them. They say, fuck it, we'll just go to the next realm. All I gotta say is white people, you need to unite and form whatever union you need to form again too, because they took your United States, they took your United States away from y'all a long time ago. And now it's run by these folks here. So they don't care who they enslave. They don't care. Honestly, I don't think they're human. I strongly suggest you get your shit together too, but you can't come with us. Now you want to ally, want to do business, you got no problem with that. But you need to unite. You need to contact the United Nations and tell them that y'all is being enslaved as well. Yeah. Y'all need to form your own nation. Because this here mess right here, this, by the way, this video was done in 2020, December of 2020. Well, ain't that old. Y'all been infiltrated. And y'all been running around here doing whatever the heck you think you can or want, enjoying your privilege while they sucking up all your money too. They ain't gonna do ours no more. The United Nations say we indigenous people and we got a right to form a nation. You got a ways to go though. Yeah. One thing I know for certain, two for sure. And again, I'm talking to white people. Long as you got your foot on somebody's neck, you can't go nowhere. Well, we've evolved. Black America is the 10th largest GDP in the whole freaking world. We don't know what y'all gonna do. But you can't come in our nation. And that's that. Peace, open roads, overstanding, and protection. Blessed be.